We have breaking news from the NHL. The NHL's first buyout window is ready to close, and we have some big names on waivers for the purpose of buyout today. We'll discuss who's being bought out and how it impacts the salary cap for those teams coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have some pretty significant news over the NHL. As we know, the NHL buyout window closes tomorrow. So for any players that require unconditional waivers for the purpose of a buyout, today would be the last day for teams to place those players on waivers so that the buyout can be completed before the window closes. Now, of course, if a player has a full no-move clause, they don't need waivers because they can just be bought out because they can't go on waivers anyway. So there is still the potential, I guess, for a player with a full no-move to be bought out tomorrow, but it's unlikely at this point. I think most of the buyouts have been kind of processed here. But here's what we learned today, which some of these are not a surprise, but one of them certainly is. The Winnipeg Jets have processed a buyout for unconditional waivers here for Blake Wheeler, longtime captain, 12 years with the organization. The last remaining member who came with the team when they moved from the Atlanta areas, the Atlanta Thrashers. He had 1 year left, over $8 million on his contract. We had heard for quite some time that Wheeler and the Jets were mutually trying to figure out a way for things to wrap up and for him to move on, whether it be via trade or via buyout. If they were going to do a trade, they would have had to retain 50% of the salary, which would still be over a $4 million cap hit, which as much as there's interest out there in Wheeler, it's still tough for a lot of teams to take on that money with the flat cap not really rising a whole lot in the last few years. Teams are up against it hard, and until we see more significant increases in the next couple of years, this is going to be, unfortunately, a little bit more common. So Wheeler ended up going through a buyout. So his cap hit will be reduced to 2.75 for this year, and they'll have an additional year. Of course, the cap hit for this year would have been a little bit higher had they made a trade and retained half the money, but then they would have been able to avoid the 2.75 dead money cap hit next year, which kind of sucks. But at the same time, you have to do what you have to do. The captain actually put out a nice message via video through social media, thanking the fans and the organization for a terrific 12 years, some of the greatest years of his life, he said. So like I said, as much as a lot of people want to talk about all the changes going on in Winnipeg, this decision was very much mutual, and Wheeler was certainly not caught off guard by this. Him and the team and the organizations, the GM Kevin Shoveldayoff, had discussed great options, and several options for them to consider here to do what's best for the team and for Blake personally. So obviously, it's the end of an era in Winnipeg. Their longtime captain is moving on. The more surprising buyout of the day, though, is the Nashville Predators and Matt Duchene, who had 3 years left at $8 million per season. This one is going to be a lot more long-term and expensive. I mean, we know that Barry Trotz, obviously taking over as GM of the Preds, wanted to make significant changes, and obviously I think it's fair to say that they're really focusing on changing the entire culture and makeup of this franchise. They were able to trade Ryan Johansson with retained money, so obviously they moved on from him, and now they're moving on from Duchene. I talked for the last few years that they have two $8 million centermen who are supposed to be their two top six centers, and they have been their two most inconsistent players. Unfortunately, these things did not really go the greatest the last few years for either of them in Nashville. I'm a little surprised they went down this road with Duchene just because of the long-term implications here of the salary cap, but it's still a situation where they felt like that it's best what's needed to do. So obviously Matt Duchene is now going to be on the UFA market. As much as the UFA market is not the deepest and a little thin this year, these players will actually have more options than usual probably to get new deals. I mean, I have no doubt that they'll get signed somewheres, and because they're going to still be getting paid a chunk of their salary off their old team, they can certainly sign for far less than what their current contracts that are being bought out are valued at. Obviously, the Predators are going to see a big savings in salary cap this year, but years 2 and 3, there's still between $5 and $6 million cap hit, as you see on the screen here. It's going to, next year and the year after, they're going to have a fair bit of dead money, so that's going to hurt for sure. So this kind of does tell us that the Preds are heading into more, I don't know if they really want to call it a rebuild, but to me, it sure looks like it after moving on from a lot of these veterans. They're going to keep some vets around, and obviously going to work with them to get through this, like the Yossi and probably Saros and Forsberg, but for the most part, I think a lot of other players are going to be moved on from. After that, of course, on the Duchene contract, they're going to have 3 extra years tacked on. So instead of having 3 years commitment to this player, they're going to have him on the books for 6. And years 2 and 3 will be the worst of it. So certainly, like I said, a long-term financial commitment and a little bit of pain for the Predators. We've seen the Wild go through this as well with Suter and Parise, but they felt like they absolutely had to change the makeup and culture of the team, and Nashville's kind of going through the same sort of thing here. Just not quite to that extent, but similar. Detroit is buying out newly acquired forward Kyler Yamamoto, who they picked up from the Edmonton Oilers along with Clint Costin. He has 1 year left. He's in the RFA category, so it's a little cheaper to do, making $3.1 million. Now, when you're a UFA, how it works, in case I didn't explain this before, or you're new to this concept in the NHL, basically what they do is they take the money remaining on the contract. You're paid 2/3 of the money, but it's stretched out over twice the period of time. When you're younger, though, and you're still an RFA, so if you have less than 7 years experience in the NHL under the age of 27, you get a 1/3 buyout, so it's less money, again, over twice the period of time. So where Yamamoto, with his contract, this year, the cap it will go from 3.1 to 433,000. So we'll save a little over 2.5, a little over $2.5 billion there. So good savings, and then next year it's only 533. So not much of a cap hit, but the narrative out of Detroit saying that they really couldn't afford to do this cap-wise, I don't completely understand that. They have all kinds of cap room, and now I know they have a fair bit of unsigned contracts as well, but I do wonder what else they're planning to do, because I find it confusing why Detroit, I know they wanted Clint Costin more than Yamamoto when they made this trade with Edmonton, and they're hoping to sign Costin. I don't see how Yamamoto can't fit into their team and how they can't afford him for 1 year, but that's what they're going with. I guess maybe as the rest of free agency, everything unfolds in Detroit, we'll understand things a little bit better. And a less surprising move here as well, the Boston Bruins are buying out the final year of defenseman Mike Reilly's contract. He had 1 year left at $3 million. Reilly spent the bulk of last year in the minors. Certainly had his moments where he's a good skater, serviceable defenseman, but for the most part is kind of just an extra depth guy, and he's kind of got to the point where he was overpaid, which is not his fault, but certainly the Bruins end up having to bury him in the minors. So this year they'll save $2.6 million of that $3 million, which will be a huge savings for them. They're really tight up against it and have a lot of contracts they're trying to figure out there. So the Bruins are in tough for sure, but they will have a new added on cap hit of dead money next year, $1.3 million. Not really ideal, but still a situation where they comes up. I guess in a way, I'm surprised that they couldn't find a way like the Oilers did with Yamamoto or the Islanders did with Bailey, when they could have traded Reilly with 50% retained and then had the other team do the buyout or something like that. Because really, like, for the cap hit, I'm surprised a team like Chicago or somebody wouldn't have done that, but they would have had to give up an extra asset as well to make it happen, and I guess maybe they just didn't feel like that was worth it. But they saved $2.6 million this year, dead cap in at 1.3 next year, and they're done with Mike Reilly also becoming a free agent. So you get one more defenseman, a center, and a couple of wingers added to the free agent crop here today. So obviously all these buyouts will be officially processed as of tomorrow once they clear waivers, but nobody in waivers for buyouts ever get picked up. Doesn't make any sense. They can always be signed as the UFA the day after and be signed for far less money. So these players are moving on. Let me know your thoughts on these buyouts down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.